All right, we are live. Hey y'all, welcome to my little cooking demo. I'm doing this for a couple reasons. One is getting myself back into practice. I have been away from um, I've been away from a kitchen for a while. So let me just set this up. I have been away from a kitchen for a while that I feel good about. So y'all know if you've come to the Institute, you've seen my kitchen. Hold on, let me just get this all populated right fast. Okay, here we go. Okay, there we go. So if you come to the kitchen, if you come to the Institute, you see my kitchen. And since I've been in Hawaii, I've been visiting. And for me, when I pick a house, I usually pick based on like the kitchen. It's a big part of how I select where I'm going to live. And it's just been a little challenging working in kitchens that are a little bit smaller or a little bit different than what I'm used to. And I have the opportunity to take care of one of my friend's dogs while they had a little vacation, a little mini staycation, and also have access to a bigger kitchen, one with an island and all the things that I need, Le Creuset, real pots, heavy duty pots and stuff. So I'm excited. And since I owed everyone, I didn't owe you anything, but I did make some commitments as far as um, sharing some cooking demos on my How Booty Got Fat page for members, for those of you that are members. And so this is actually going to be live on, or it already is live on Patreon. Some of you are joining me from the live stream on Patreon. And for those of you that are not, that just popped in from a link or are joining me on Instagram, you will be cut off at a certain point. But I wanted to get started talking about it, introduce you to what some of the other work that I do, so you can come on and join us over on Patreon. This was started because a bunch of people kept asking me to start sharing some of the recipes when I have the Tantra Fest or any of my events. Usually I cook for the events, and so I prepare plant-based foods, and it's a little bit different than what people are used to. I also am, I enjoy the kitchen. My first business was actually a restaurant cafe on the southwest side of Chicago, Indica Cafe on 63rd and Holman. And so I enjoy, I actually really love being in the kitchen. I really love the what I consider to be food alchemy, playing with things and turning them into other magical things. And it is the first magic that I really learned from my grandma. So I really like to share that first and foremost. So what happens? What am I going to do today? Today I'm going to show you how to make vegan meat. Specifically vegan gyro meat or gyro meat, depending on what part of the country you're from. This is something that I love to make. It's a pretty easy dish, and it's also really affordable. One of the things that will make me, you'll see me have a temper tantrum in Whole Foods when I look at certain prices. People often talk about how expensive it is to eat plant-based foods, and it's really not. It's not expensive to eat plant-based foods. We just don't know what to do with all these plant-based foods that we have access to. So I'm going to play around with some really, really, really low cost ingredients: chickpea flour, vital wheat gluten, some herbs, some broth. All of these things are really, really inexpensive and make a substantial amount of meat, vegan meat. So the full recipe will be also put on Patreon on the same post. So if you're watching this on Patreon, don't worry. The full recipe will be on the same post. If you're not watching this on Patreon, go ahead and jump over, because once I walk through the beginning, I'm going to shut off my live and get started on that. So, couple things, kitchen tools that you need. And this is just some basics. So if you're trying to wonder how to outfit your kitchen so that you can start cooking better, you need a steamer. Now, you can buy them in a variety of styles. This is the one I have access to here. I have bamboo steamers at home in Atlanta. You can also, if you have a pressure cooker, like an Instapot or a Breville or whatever your pressure cooker system is, you can also utilize that to steam. There's a steam option on all of those. So you can take advantage of that as well. All right. Cool. So that's the first thing you want to do. You also want to have some heavy duty wooden spoons. I cook with wooden spoons or bamboo spoons because I need something that's going to be sturdy enough for me to mix. I don't also trust plastics. My grandma didn't trust plastics and she taught me how to cook, so I don't trust plastics either. Skillets that don't have nonstick, stainless steel, or some of the Calphalon brands, I would recommend that you get skillets that don't have nonstick coating. You don't want to eat that and it's going to come up. You're going to forget to use your wooden spoon and go do some other crazy shit. So don't do that. So that, and then bowls make life better. So what I like to do when I'm preparing to cook is I like to actually, it's because I watched the Food Network for so long, make sure that I have shit together and ready to go so that it makes my cooking easier. When cooking is a task, it's no fun. So if you can figure out how to make it less of a task, like by being fully prepared to cook when it's time to cook, it makes it easier. So what we're going to be using for this recipe, like I said, is going to be vital wheat gluten, chickpea flour. You'll need some veggie broth, nutritional yeast, soy sauce, tomato paste, Greek seasoning, which I'll give you my recipe for my Greek seasoning on Patreon, onions, and garlic. If you have access to vegan Worcestershire, or you don't mind the anchovies that are in regular Worcestershire sauce, then you can use that as well. Or use that in place of amino acids or shoyu soy sauce. So that's what we're cooking with today. If you want to follow along, if you want the recipe, if you want to learn how to make your own affordable, I mean, all of those ingredients probably will run you about $5 to $6 at the store. And the amount of vegan meat that we're going to make could feed a family of 6 easily. So if you want to follow along, please come on over to Patreon. For those of you that are not there on this side, it's patreon.com/ATL Tantra. The link's in my bio. And then just click on the live link. I'm streaming live over there. For everybody else, if you're cooking with me, get your pot ready, fill it up with water. We're going to steam. Thanks. I'll see you over there on Patreon, y'all. Okay, so share to, yep. Okay, so what I'm going to do first and foremost is I'm going to get my pot ready with some water because this needs to have broth in it. And the broth, I'm going to use a bouillon. I found this bouillon recently and I really like it. At home, I usually use, there's a vegan halal bouillon cube that I get from the African shop. We don't have African shops here, so I'm going to use this. You can also use something like this, which is better than bouillon, and just use a tablespoon of that. But you're going to need some broth ready. So fill your pot up with water, get your broth going. And then while that fills up, there's a couple of other steps that we're going to do. We're going to saute some onions and garlic. And we're going to get our herbs kind of popping first. So I make my own dried herb blend, which is what you, that's funny. Which is what you'll get the recipe for. You'll get the recipe for my dried herb blend on Patreon. It'll be there for you, but you can go and find some substitutes that I think are great. Frontier Co-op has a Greek seasoning. I think it's called pizza seasoning. Sorry. That is a good option. Also, if you just have a good Mediterranean mix that you like, you can play with that. Some of the things that are really important to have in your dried blend, and you'll see this in my recipe, make sure there's dried garlic, dried onions, dehydrated onions, dehydrated garlic, dehydrated red peppers. There's one of the things I like to do to kind of make it easy is Trader Joe's actually has a 21 seasoning salute. So I'll put a bunch of that in a bowl. I'll mix that with their onion salt, which is desiccated onions, garlic, parsley. And then I will add marjoram, oregano, and basil to it, so that I get that Greek influence that's going to be, and then that gives it that Greek meat taste, which is what we're going for. Okay. So go ahead and get your skillet. Okay, which eye? I don't know which eyes are which here yet, so bear with me. We'll get your skillet started to warm up. Put a little olive oil in that. You want to have it on medium, so don't have it or medium low. Burnt onions are no bueno. And then also just as a habit of cooking, if you are not a big chef, that was about, I do this all the time. That was about 2 tablespoons of olive oil in the skillet. So burnt onions are horrible. And a lot of people can't cook because they cook everything on super high. So stop pushing things on high. If you want to learn how to cook, turn the fire down is my first piece of advice. You don't need to cook almost anything on high unless you're deep frying something. And even then, probably should only be on mid-high. So we're gonna dice up some onions. I'm using half of a sweet onion. This is a large size sweet onion. I'm gonna use about half of it. I'm gonna dice it up into, when I say dice, it's diced, right? So don't be shy about it and don't have don't make them super chunky. You want this to be, you want to taste the onion in the meat. And anybody that cooks with me knows that I go through a 10-pound bag of sweet onions in a week. This is a sweet onion. I like sweet onions when they have less acid, and the flavor that they impart in the food is just way better. So just make sure that the onion is as evenly diced as possible. You don't want really big chunks cooking with really small chunks. That won't allow it to cook evenly. And getting a big chunk of almost cooked onion in your food is never good. So just always try to make a habit. I find that chopping is like a little bit of a meditation for me. Trying to get things to be in the same size makes me feel good. It makes me have a sense of accomplishment when I get that done. So we'll start with that. Get those going in the skillet. And I'm actually only going to use a quarter of this. This onion was rather large. So this is what a quarter of it would look like. And I just used about this much in that. So for what I'm doing, I'm going to use 1/4 of an extra large. These onions are huge here in Hawaii. So you might not have an onion that big. Most sweet onions, I would probably use a whole half of a sweet onion for this. If you have a really small sweet onion, use the whole thing. And I'm just gonna let that saute down, let the onions get glossy and pretty, start stocking my bowl. We compost, so I'm getting my scraps in the bowl so that I can dump it into the compost easily. Next up is garlic. So I have a fresh clove of garlic. I know a lot of people like to use the jarred garlic. It is easier, but nothing good comes easy. So don't be afraid to get your hands dirty with some real garlic, or some, not real, the other stuff's real too, but some fresh garlic. So I'm just gonna beat it a little bit, smash it down, makes it easier to pop open. I have 4 medium-sized cloves of garlic. Yes, 4. I like onions and garlic in my food, and we're cooking in the Mediterranean today. This is Greek food, and Greeks don't skimp on their garlic either. Once it cooks down and sautés down into the skillet, it will not be as pungent as fresh garlic is. So don't worry about your breath stinking. It's really about the flavor. And again, we're just going to chop this up. We don't want any gigantic chunks of garlic in the mouth. That's not going to be fun. So you just want to chop it up. You'll continue to stir the onions in this process. That's why I like the kitchen like this, where I can be right next to whatever I'm working on instead of like having to keep rushing back to check on it. Okay, so now you have your garlic nice and minced up into small little bits. And as the onions start to saute, I wait to add my garlic because garlic will cook a little more rapidly. So I want the onions to get a little glassier first. So wait till the onions get nice and glassy, and then you'll throw the garlic in there. Don't be in a rush to cook the garlic, and don't be in a rush to turn the heat up either. Once that gets sauteed, then you're gonna put your, where is it? Here it is. Your seasoning blend. So this is the Greek seasoning blend that I'm gonna be using. And again, I'll share this recipe with you. You'll just, 3 tablespoons of that is what I'm using. You can play with the flavor alone, like how you want, but I like my food to be really flavorful. I find that is one of the best things you can do when playing with. I mean, we're cooking with vital wheat gluten, which is the protein from wheat, right? So it's not super flavorful. You really have to be responsible for adding your own flavors in. And then as you cook, it should start looking like that. You see that? So it will absorb. The olive oil is cooked into the onions, and that is somewhat ready to go. We'll let that cook a little bit longer. By cooking it here, that lets the flavor start to open up. Remember, I told you you're adding some tomato paste. So for this part, you'll use about a tablespoon of tomato paste, but I'm using ultra concentrated tomato paste. If you don't have ultra concentrated tomato paste, then you probably want to use 2 tablespoons instead of 1. But mine is ultra concentrated. I'm just going to use 1 tablespoon. Dump that into the same skillet. And then what else goes in there is your shoyu or your soy sauce or your Worcestershire, whatever it is, however you say that word. You just dump that in there. I'm using 1 tablespoon of shoyu or soy sauce. You can also use 1 tablespoon of Bragg's amino acids, and that was 1 tablespoon of vegan Worcestershire, which is available at Whole Foods. I'm sure there's some other places that have it, but we have a limited marketplace here in Hawaii, and so that's where I would go. Down to Earth also has it. None of these people are paying me to say this stuff, so go find it on your own. By the time it's said and done, now you can see that looks delicious. And I'm just gonna turn that off. That's it. Simple. The water is still boiling over here, so it's getting ready for my bouillon. And now we get to the fun part. And the fun part is making the seitan or seitan, however you say it. I don't know. Do not quote me. So let me put my onion and garlic away. So what goes in the seitan? Well, here we go, y'all. This is the fun part. So you're going to need about 1.5 cups of vital wheat gluten and 1/4 cup of chickpea flour. So I don't know where I put mine. Hold on. Where did I put mine? Here it is. So I buy mine in the bulk section. I find that to be the most affordable and realistic for me. So this is vital wheat gluten. So I'm going to use 1.5 cups of vital wheat gluten. And this is not science, so your measurements don't have to be 100% exact, but that's what the recipe would be when I wrote it down. I tend to eyeball a lot when I cook, which means that no one can really get a recipe from me. So I had to write down the recipe as it would actually be prepared, and then show you how this all works on your own. And then you're going to use 1/4 cup of chickpea flour, which is also the same as 3 tablespoons. So since I don't know what her cup measurements are in her kitchen, I'm just going to use 3 tablespoon action of chickpea flour. a little bit more. I think I went a little heavy on the vital wheat gluten. All right. So that's really, I mean, oh, and nutritional yeast. We'll need some nutritional yeast in this too. So here I have 2 tablespoons of nutritional yeast. I'm gonna dump that in there. Great. And now we're ready to begin. This is, all you need to do for this is just stir it up. You wanna get it nice and evenly stirred before you do anything else to it, before you start to add anything else. Okay. Oops. All right, cool. Jesus. This is why you're supposed to wear an apron. Okay, so from here, the next step is just water. We're just gonna add water to this part, and then we'll add in the seasoning mix that we have already over there. So I'm gonna add a little bit of water at a time, and this is gonna become dough. So I'm gonna get rid of this paddle real quick. I'm gonna get my hands in here. I'm gonna put my back into it. It's just like any dough where you don't want to super overwork it, but you want to be able to, you're going to see it get tough. And this is one of the things that makes it really exciting for me when I'm cooking with gluten is it really is like a science project, because you can see the threads of the protein kind of start to meld together. So far I'm at 3 shots or 3 ounces of water on this. It's getting there. I'm gonna have 2 more of these before I start adding in the seasoning. So I'm gonna do 5 shots of, or 5 ounces of water. Before we start adding in all that delicious yumminess that gives it its flavor. And you're not dumping it all in at once. You're kind of taking your time and working the bowl. Okay, so here we go. So now we have this, and you're literally kneading the dough. You can see how like this is really becoming very fibrous. I'm gonna go ahead and dump all of this into that as well and start kneading it all in together. Now, one of the things you might want to make sure is that you let that onion mix cool down a bit. Just, I'm used to working with my hands in hot stuff. That doesn't mean you have to. You can take your time, but I am used to kind of the heat of the kitchen. So yeah, so we're just kneading it just like dough, and it is dough. I mean, essentially it is dough. It's just a high protein dough. So once you've gotten all the onions really well incorporated into it, it starts to look like this. You really get that onion mixture fully in the meat. Really work it around. Bring it using your fists and your hands. You're really just kind of allowing this, like allowing yourself to get in there. Cooking this is the action sport. Once you get all that done, then you're gonna let it sit and rest just like you would a bread dough. So just get it into a nice ball and let it rest. Okay, wash my hands. Now your water should be boiling. So if your water is boiling, one of the things that's really important is to test. Let me move this so it can be on an eye that you can see. But one of the things that's really important is to test your level of steam. So by putting this in, I want to make sure that there's no water coming up into the pot, because if that's boiling, that's not steaming. So that's good. That's right. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put one of my bouillon cubes into the pot and let that start to disintegrate. This is going to impart additional flavor into the meat. So, and then this is also really where much of the salt taste is going to come from as well, without it being too hard to taste. And you just mix that around. Give it time, it'll start to break apart. Unless you're using Better Than Bouillon where it's a liquid, just mix that in. After a few minutes, you're gonna come back to your C10, your I don't know why I did that. Your fake meat. I should do it for fake meat. You're gonna come back to your C10 and you'll knead it again. So this process I go through 2 or 3 times where I let it rest for a few minutes, come back to it, knead it up again, let it rest for a few more minutes, come back to it, knead it up again, and let it rest for a few minutes and come back to it and knead it up again. So what do you do in the meantime? Well, what do you eat with your gyros? It's a good thing to start thinking about now. For me, I like to make a tzatziki sauce. And if you've never made a tzatziki sauce before or had one, I've always, even when I ate meat, I was always lactose intolerant. It was never something that I was just going to go out and enjoy some lactose. So the tzatziki sauce that's traditional is made with Greek yogurt. And that's always upset my stomach. So I make a tzatziki sauce that doesn't try to kill me. It's just going to be I use coconut yogurt, but you can also use, I found Forager, their cashew yogurt, to be really good for this. And what are you going to do? You're going to get some fresh dill, which I still have to go out and harvest from the garden. You're going to get some fresh dill, and you're going to get your cucumber. I like to use a Japanese cucumber or an English cucumber, and you grate the cucumber. Throw that in your yogurt with your dill, a little bit of lemon and some salt, and let that sit in the fridge while you're waiting for your C10 to finish. This takes a while. So this process was really easy and quick. I'm going to knead it again now when I'm talking to you. This process didn't take much time at all, right? When you think about it, like we've been here for 27 minutes. Some of that minutes was just me talking to you, and we're already almost ready for this to go in the pot. So I'm going to knead it again right before I throw it in, and then it sits in there for an hour. So I'm going to say goodbye at that point. So yes, during that time, while that hour is going by, it's important to have some fun with some other stuff. So there are recipes out there that I like to play around with for pita bread, because what are you going to put this meat in when it's done? Or you're just going to have a salad, which is also good because you don't need gluten on your gluten, right? So sometimes just making a nice Greek salad, which is what I'm going to do today. I have some vegan feta from BioLife. I have some green, some red bell pepper, some black olives, tomatoes, cucumbers. I'm going to make just a really beautiful Greek salad. And then when this is done, I'll slice it up on top of that. Yeah, basically like that. So now you see it starting to come together. You have like a little ball, a little loaf. It's also going to grow a bit in the pot. So a lot of times people will put it into quarters. But because I only made 1.5 cups of gluten flour today, usually I make a larger batch, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to leave it just like this and put it right on into the pot. Now, let me tell you a couple of like insider tips on this, okay? Let me rinse my hands really quickly. So one of the things that I have is that I notice when I do this, is that there's all this good at the bottom of my pot, right? At the bottom of my bowl. All the onions that didn't make it into the mix are still here, and I want that to go in. So what I'm going to do is actually pour some water in here, swish it around, and put that in the pot that I'm going to steam in. I'm going to let this flavor that's in here just kind of get doubled down into there. So I'm going to rest all of this in around the bowl and pour this into my boiling steam pot. So that onion flavor just gets steamed into there. You can play around with other stuff in the steam pot. I always laugh when I see recipes on C10 and they're like, put a little bit of broth in the pot that you're steaming in. I always, instead of, like if I wasn't making this style of seitan, which has a lot of flavor because of the Greek seasoning. If I was making anything else, I would put broth in my seitan, in my mix, to have more flavor, instead of just in here. Seitan is super bland, but it can be really, really delicious. You can play around with all kind of other flavors. You can use smoke flavoring. You can use like any kind of steak seasoning that you might use on traditional meat, on like, animal products, and play around with that so that you have like a real delicious, savory protein option that is really affordable. I don't know if you've ever looked at seitan when it's in the grocery store, but a little bit of pack of like 6 ounces usually runs you about $6 to $7. Whereas I have so much. Look how much leftover I have. I can make so much more right now if I wanted to. I can make a whole nother batch. Both of these right here ran me a total of $5. So it's a really, really big difference. And when this is done, you'll see how much. It's heavy. This is a good 1.5 pounds, maybe 2 pounds. And as it expands, you'll see how much it is. I'll have a picture of its final product in Patreon for you to see it so that you know what to do with it, and also to show you how I cut it. So I'm going to go ahead and put this now into my little steam pot here. I think it's ready. No, remember I told you to watch and make sure that there's no bubbles, no water coming up, because you don't want it to boil. Well, of course, there's water coming up right now as it starts to boil up. So I'm going to let that cook off just a little bit. It's just a little bit of water, but I don't want that to interfere with my seitan. You can boil seitan. There are several recipes that recommend boiling seitan. The reason why I don't boil seitan is because I like mine to be a little bit tougher. I like that toughness that it really gives you that meat feeling to chew. I want that sensation still in my body. So, when you cook it and when you boil it, it doesn't come out as tough as steak like, as meat like. So I'm trying to make mine be as much like meat as possible. All right, here we go. So I'm just going to set that in there, put my lid on top. And it is 11 o'clock here. So that's going to cook for 1 hour, 45 minutes to an hour. I'll keep checking on it. And once that's done, then we'll have gyro meat, seitan style. So there you go. There you have it. For the recipe and the rest of the details about this, please come on over to Patreon. Join me live. Join me on there. The same post that you caught this stream from will have the recipe. It will have photos of the finished product updated in the next hour and a half. Okay. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your Sunday. Thank you for tuning in. Bye, y'all.